Hey, everyone out there, welcome to a special episode of Rupert and Pinchy. I am Rupert, also known as the Squirrel Master, and that is Pinchy over there, also known as Isaiah. So, what we decided to do is view back at our big, start looking at our earlier videos and maybe critiquing them and maybe commenting on them or adding to them. And so,
Well, maybe at this
yeah,
rate.
yeah. And we're going to start with episode. It's on the screen. It says episode number 1. Is it actually episode number 1?
It is, yeah.
Oh, okay. So
I thought we would start at the beginning, yeah.
Welcome to Rupert and Pinchy Show. We're glad that you're joining us today, and we hope that you find it
That's better.
entertaining, okay, and informative. Wow, look at
thought-provoking. Absolutely.
Therefore, that's when you were on Ozempic.
Let
Pinchy do most of the talking.
No, I wasn't.
But no, today we're going to talk about our intro kind of alludes to that, being trapped on the squirrel cage. The world presses in upon us. The culture presses on us. The things that we see around the world. Okay, so notice a couple things, Pinchy. First of all, I live in a different place. Secondly, we got right to the subject with no entry stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I think that starting out, the joking around bit wasn't a thing yet. And honestly, I think part of the appeal of our show is also the beginning part of our joking around and being able to be serious and also be relatable in certain ways. So, I mean, I get why you might prefer it to get to the topic quicker, but I think there's also a benefit in doing it like we do it now. But I don't know.
Well, one of the reasons I like to get a topic quicker is obviously for the benefit of our listeners. So, for their if they're used to us, okay, I can wait until the 10-minute mark before I really start listening to them. Then, it's a lot of wasted energy on our part, but we don't want to waste their time, right?
Right.
So,
but one other detail, though, is we also had a lot of notes for that particular episode.
Do we? I don't even recall.
Yep.
And it can be overwhelming. And if we're one of those people, is that proper English? If we're one of those types of people that like to stay informed, the way the world is set up right now, especially for information, is there's a huge giant spigot and you will be filled with information. There's the internet. There's the news. There's the radio. There's written form news. There's Rupert and Pinchy's podcast, newspapers, which is not commonly used anymore. Movies. I mean,
can you pause? So, I could pause at like any point in this video because a lot of it is really great, but I'll try to limit it. But I realized the truth in that statement that you just made more and more and more today, especially. It's like the amount of information that's on the internet is just it's absurd. And the reason why I've noticed it more is because I've been doing more research and stuff. And it's like the biggest question that I can barely answer is who should I listen to and who should I trust when they're speaking? Because here's the thing. There's people that are that I believe are great people on multiple ends of the spectrum, not necessarily politically, but at least when it comes to like Catholicism and Protestantism, as well as like, the differences with a lot of the denominations and stuff. I feel like there's a lot of good people on different sides. And so when I hear like, let me give an example, Matt Frad say something, I'm likely to consider it. But if somebody like David Wood says something, or Michael Jones, or some of the other Protestants that I watch say something, I'm likely to believe what they're saying. And so, when it comes to the sheer amount of information that's on the internet, that compounds the issue. That makes it even more difficult because it's like, I heard this person say this the other day, now I heard this person say this the next day. But anyway, I've just realized that this is a way bigger issue than I realized at the time that we made that podcast.
Well, if I may also say, you mentioned that you believe this person or believe that. Really, what you mean to say is that, or correct me, but when someone hears that, they might think, oh, yeah, you just believe what this person says and you believe. That's not what you're saying. You're saying that you respect and can have agreement on maybe some point that they're making, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but it's
Uh,
also a true that when you hear somebody that you like, that you want to agree with them in many areas because you agree with them in certain areas. So let me give an example. Like, um, I want. Well, I'm not going to give that example. Never mind. All I'm saying is that even though I want to be logical in everything and I don't want to be biased, there's a certain level that bias isn't terrible. That why do I like listening to um uh Matt Fradd? Because he's proven himself to be trustworthy in certain areas, and so that makes me want to agree with him. So that's just a psychological thing as well, and we want to avoid that, but it's difficult to avoid. Was kind of the main point that I was making as well. But anyway,
well, another thing that strikes me is that uh, you and I both have maybe even my schedule. You and I have very open schedules. I'm uh semi-retired, basically retired, but and you are retired to doing uh in a sense that your whole time is spent on study and you're not, this is kind of your job and
right,
what we do here and other things that you are involved with. And so you and I have a lot of time to watch a video or to listen on YouTube or whatever. And
right,
I for one, with all my free time, I do, I would say very little uh watching of YouTube or online stuff but I do a lot of reading or praying and smoking cigars, of course. But so the
surprised you didn't start with that.
yeah, so most of our listeners, I would say, are very busy on really and have a lot of responsibility for families or for a job, for a spouse. You know, Ethan and Lily are going to be really busy with little baby George Isaiah. I
I
guess that's what they're naming him.
I doubt it.
Okay, so or Isaiah George IGG. That would be his initials. IG. Anyway, so do you want me to keep it? Just you're absolutely right that this is it might be interesting to see what we say, but this is a real big concern.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other things that come to my mind that maybe we'll go into.
Right.
Do you want me to hit play again?
Yeah, go ahead.
We are not in a shortage of information, and so how do we deal with that? How do we remain effective? How do we become the best Christians that we can be, the best sons or daughters that we can be, the best friends that we can be, the best husband or wife that we can be, best children? Uh, what can we do? Because that constant flow from the world and the informational world, and that gives us uh, updates on what's going
Everything.
on, everything in every part of the world, we can become overwhelmed. Um,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, that's kind of one of the thing about the information age which we are in is we hear this, we hear that, and we can take that with a grain of salt, or we can what would it be? We can follow along with it, and with that, we have so much information. It can be such a blessing, but it can be such a curse as well because there are many things that we know that we would never hear of. But because we have the internet, because we have all this, we hear about it all the time. So there are many people that are just the news is really it's hard to parse out everything and to think through everything. So we jump on this bandwagon, we jump on that bandwagon, we don't necessarily understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Can you pause?
So it seems like,
And that seems to me, or that's my view of the idea of the squirrel cage, is the consistent or hearing about things that make us outraged, which makes us continue to listen to that information, which continues to make us outraged. It's like a never-ending cycle. We input information that isn't important or at least doesn't affect us, and then we get frustrated, or we get frustrated, and that frustration really affects us. And so the point that I was making here seems to me to fit with the idea of the squirrel cage itself, of the continual, perpetual motion of outrage that we get when we hear about, like, for example, oh, the Democrats are doing this. Oh, you know, they are doing this and all that. And some of it is like not terrible to know, right? But once you hear it over and over again, it's kind of gets old. So one example, and I'm not going to name any names, but there was a radio show that I listened to on AM 1130 that they were talking about the corruption in the government 2 years ago. And then 2 years went by and I didn't hear any of their shows. And then 2 years later, I hear the same exact topic talked about, the corruption of the government. And it made me actually sad. We're talking about the same thing over and over and over again when it doesn't even affect us. And once you hear it, it's kind of like, okay, now I know. So I think it's easy to get into those cages, those squirrel cages of being outraged about everything. And the thing is, it's a lot of work, it's exhausting, and I would say it's not worth my time. And I think that recently I've started to realize just how much I don't care anymore. How much I don't care. Everything that, don't get me wrong, when I say I don't care, I mean, like, I can hear it again, I can hear about the current events and stuff, and it's like, okay, that's interesting to know, but what I mean is that I realize that it really doesn't affect me as much as it used to. So, the only things that I've ever heard about Trump's administration at this point has been from other people in my family, and not from news sites, because I haven't, like, looked at any news. It's like, okay, I like that Trump's doing things. Okay, go ahead and do it. But am I going to spend my time thinking about politics constantly? No, I'm done doing that.
Yeah, I see what you when you say you don't care, I catch myself and try to change when I say that as well, because people can misunderstand, and it can reflect a bad attitude on us, that we're like as if we're above,
Right.
these things. Are these things important? Yeah, but what you're saying is like, you realize you don't, what you think doesn't control what's going to happen.
Right.
You need to be aware of it, but if you get caught on that squirrel cage, it's going to take your limited amount of time and energy that you have on this earth to focus on what's important.
Exactly.
And then also the reality is, and you and I haven't watched this show through, so this is all fresh as far as right off the bat. Whatever we're saying here, I will just humbly say that both you and I are brilliant. Um,
Very humble.
yeah, and humble. No, I'm just saying that. So this is all fresh, and the reality is, there are certain quote squirrel cages that we absolutely need to be on and in and working hard. But when you and I talk about squirrel cages, we're talking about our emphasis is about the fact that there's so many things that can suck the time, that limited time that we have, away from the actual real battle or those things that are really important.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Well, I think it comes down to the futility of the squirrel cage. Is the squirrel cage is an analogy to the futility of repeatedly being consumed with things that don't affect us in our lives. Whereas, like religious truths about the Christian faith, are worth continually, perpetually submerging ourselves in. I think. There's a certain limit to that, obviously, but I think that there is there are certain things that are worth repeating and hearing over and over and over again. But when it comes to things like politics, I've kind of hit my limit on that. It's like it's good that you're doing that, Matt Walsh. I'm glad that you're making those movies, and they're fun watching.
and they're important. They're important.
They're very important, and that's the thing is they've got it covered. That's how I feel about it. It's like they've got it covered. It's good enough for me. Go ahead, but I'm gonna focus on other things that at least I think affect me. But I mean, I'm just not in that sphere anymore, and I think that there is a danger of being in that sphere constantly. But anyway.
All right, let me click it. There are three basic responses that we could have to all this information. We could avoid it and live our life,
Which many people do.
Yep. The second one, we could be consumed by it by scrupulously being constantly plugged in. Or three, we could prudently and temperately stay informed. And those are really the three main options that you have. Avoid, be feverishly plugged in and consumed by the information, or prudently process the information and maintain control over it.
Two vices and one virtue.
Yeah, there's two. So yeah, prudence, or number one would be basically cowardice.
Yeah.
Number two would be
courage.
Rashness.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Would be rashness, and number three would be prudence, and like you said, courage.
Yep.
Well, that other one that we said that would be cowardice would also be sloth, right?
The being scrupulously. Oh no, the other one.
No, the one just
Giving
avoiding
up.
and not caring.
Well, yeah. So I mean, there are certain things at stake, with information, and so like shirking away from it could be considered slothful because you're not spending as much effort as you should. I don't know what sloth exactly means, but that's my understanding of what it means. It's like you should be doing something, but you're not doing it. So I think it's good for us to be informed on certain things. And so I think it could be considered that. Cowardice to me doesn't fit as well as sloth, because cowardice would mean, to me, part of cowardice is the intent to avoid it because you're afraid of something, and that's not always the case with people that aren't interested in hearing the information. I would say sloth seems to fit better. Better. I mean, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think cowardice does fit in the fact that some people, you said it perfectly clearly, want to avoid. They want to avoid the battle, because it is a battle
Mhm.
when there's competing. So, but I'm with you that when we're talking about the avoidance, it more comes down to sloth. And the interesting thing about that is that generally when you think of sloth, you're thinking of the sloth,
Yeah, the animal.
the creature that works really slow. And it's like, and so sometimes you think, okay, sloth is always really slow like that. No, sloth can also mean that someone's really busy. They spend 23 hours and 40 minutes at the gym every day, but they're not keeping their house clean
Mhm.
or relating to people or doing the other. They're slothful about those things. So it's kind of interesting. Slothness can be actually pretty active, but it's being slothful in our awareness of things that are important.
Mhm.
It occurs to me is like, for example, recently, uh, you and I've talked, and we've heard talk about how, wow, things are really becoming really clear about what side of the political spectrum believes certain things. It's like, no, it's been clear a long time. You know, it's not. And so maybe it's become more clear to the point that people don't have an excuse for when they select a side, and there's right and wrong. um
Yeah.
and there's clear truth, and so now there's no excuse for what side you're on. So if you maybe used to be able to use that excuse of being slothful, but now it's like, no, it's really clear. This side believes that human life is very its worth is very cheap, and newborn babies or unborn babies have no value. Gender girlness or womanness and maleness or boyness is of no value anymore. It's totally blurred, and so it's like, well, now I've what I'm thinking of is certain political and sports commentators that have come out and said how stupid they feel for having voted for a certain person.
Mhm.
And I'm like, nah, not buying it, dude. Because tomorrow, if the election was, you would still vote the same way. Forget it. Don't play this game with me. Now we're on a different thing. But that's another tangent. Let's stay on the topic, right? So um there's a saying that you and I talk about. I bet you I'm gonna say something about surfing. But anyway,
Yeah, I remember this part.
surf is up, dude. I hope that I don't talk very much. I'd rather listen to you. I really love listening to these things uh, later and focusing on what you said. And so many times I get mad at myself. I'm like, oh man, Pinchy went off on a good thing on that. I should have focused on what he was saying more. But here we go. I bet you it's going to be surfing. Don't you think it's going to be surfing?
I think so.
That um, there the life is like an ocean with great giant waves, and we are not to drown in the ocean, but we're to ride the wave.
I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Ride the
And
wave,
so,
man.
yeah, ride the wave, man.
Pause.
I'm riding a wave. So
That joke is so cheesy. All right, go ahead.
but it's cheesy,
But
but
it's accurate.
okay.
I like it.
I think the Lord, the blessed Lord, uh, um, would have used that analogy or that metaphor
Maybe.
or that parable that you and I use, because when you say it, that's what's so beneficial about uh, parables, especially when they're well thought out, and they just say a lot with few words, and everyone knows exactly what you mean without having to go into all the details.
Right.
And so and this is one of those things that um, people, they understand exactly what you mean. Yeah, I want to swim. I don't want to drown. I want to ride the wave. I don't want to. Okay. So what we want to talk about today is,
That's
first of all, do we think it's important to be informed?
absolutely.
So what do you think we should be informed about?
Well, we shouldn't be informed about. Um, we should be
Oh,
informed.
that's
What?
a leading question. That's a leading question. Let me I was directing you a
Simple.
certain way, and I think we should be informed about whether or not
Marsupials
no, I don't
exist.
even know if I don't know his first name. Um the tight end for Kansas City Chiefs, Kelsey and Taylor Swift, how their dating is going. I'm not sure that we really. I mean, I hope they have happy and fulfilled lives, but I don't think it's any of our business to know how their dating is going.
Yeah, I think it should be more private. But
Yeah,
anyway,
unfairly. What do you think is the first thing
to
of
know.
information that?
Yeah. Well, that would be the foundational, which is our faith. What do we believe? And many people don't know what they believe. They don't know what they'll be. They don't know what to do in their lives. And there's just so much misdirection, misunderstanding of what that is, just like it's talked about. And people have different ideas of what aiming at the good is. And we need to look at the foundational first. Can you pause?
So
We need to aim true. And that would be, I think the most apt answer would be theology and anthropology, who God is and who we are. I like that explanation. I'm not sure where that comes from, but Michael Knowles says that constantly, and I like that. So go ahead.
yeah, and when someone and and if we were and that's why it's so important to not get caught in squirrel cages, because uh coming to any kind of truth, whether you're studying to be a good football player, or you're studying to be a good scientist, or you're studying to be a good plumber, there's prerequisite knowledge that's necessary for you to succeed. And so when someone says, if you take the man on the street and do an interview, says, what do you think is the most important thing to start in form our life on? And they give their answer, and then you tell them, no, really, it's anthropology and theology. Herb is going to go, like, what are you talking about, dude? Well, uh, you realize that there's prerequisites. There's so much important things to learn, foundational precepts. And the reason a precept is simply a concept that is first. It's the first concepts that are so important on to build your life on. And so I agree with you, anthropology and theology, and someone that's, I know so many people are going to go like, what do you mean by that? So, but that's why it's so important not to be caught into squirrel cages, because there is important information that we have limited time to get. And so,
Yeah, and that affects everything. That affects politics. That affects our religious worldviews and stuff. I think politics was the first thing that came to mind because of the abortion and transgender issues. Both of those are a result of a fundamental flaw in anthropology, as well as feminism as a whole. But anyway, it's very foundational.
well, and when you say, when another way to say anthropology and theology, a real basic, simple way would be say, what is man? What is God?
I already
That's
said
basically.
that.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
When we
I'm sorry.
started, I said theology and anthropology, who God is and who we are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right. Let me go ahead. Yeah. Whoa. Where did I see that before? It's on our website.
Yeah.
So anyway,
No website.
yeah. So the first thing is to know our faith.
Yep.
Yeah. To know our faith. Understanding is necessary to know your faith. Just like being in a relationship as friends.
I don't know what that means.
You can't really be a close friend to somebody that you don't have. My gosh, we're going to say the same thing maybe that we just said. We'll see. And so now, in God and in our walk with Christ, there are those people, and we're not that maybe don't have much knowledge, but they have a lot of goodness and humility and patience and
Virtue.
no, yeah, virtue. Knowledge is a wonderful thing, and understanding is a wonderful and needful thing.
Yes,
But humility is greater than those.
absolutely.
And in order to have those requires humility. And sometimes humility comes before understanding.
Right.
And sometimes understanding comes before humility because we don't maybe know that we naturally perhaps don't know that we should be humble.
Right.
But knowledge will bring that message clear to
Yep.
us. And it may be not knowledge that we want to know. It might be our teacher sending us to the principal because we're being very disruptive. And all of a sudden we realize that it doesn't matter what we say or think. That's not the most important thing. It's that we are humble. So anyway, or maybe our
So you're
our
saying,
brothers and sisters humble
well,
us.
so you're saying
Our,
that part of
our
that
environment
is,
will humble us.
so part of that is realizing that we can be wrong. That's what humility is to some degree, right?
For yes and no.
Yeah. There's kind of a
Life is always
balance.
a paradox. Life is always a paradox.
Mm.
Humility is probably not so much that it's possible that we don't know the truth.
Right.
A greater humility would be to think that you do and still remain silent and give deference, not the silence of avoidance
Complacency, yeah.
or complacency, but the silence of prudence, where maybe it's not time to share this.
Right. Can you pause?
And that give the other person an opportunity to share.
I think there's a disconnect here. Because, or I think I approached the idea of humility wrong. I think humility is a disposition. I mean, what do you think? I think humility is more of a disposition of willing to listen, and not always speak. I mean, there's something that you brought up here that kind of relays that. But I would think humility is more like a disposition, a general disposition.
Well, when I think of humility, if someone said, "Well, what do you mean by humility?" Because that's what I guess we're talking about humility. I think it really comes back to it's very similar to, or it's connected to the two commandments that all the other commandments and truth hinge upon, and that is love of God and love of neighbor. And so humility, if it's a precept, if it's a foundational concept, then would apply to both. And so humility would be founded on both these principles. First of all, that God is creator and I'm creature. And therefore I am, it would be smart for me to be submissive to him and defer to him and submit to him. And then the other thing would be, okay, so how do I do that with my fellow man or my neighbor? Well, the way that Paul says is that to consider others better than yourself.
Right.
To think of, maybe that wouldn't be the right way to, but to expect the best of one another. And so when someone says something that seems offensive or wrong or whatever, our first inclination should be, humility would be, oh, I must be misunderstanding them.
Mm-hmm.
I need to listen better. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I was getting more at I think there's a distinction between an act of humility and humility as a disposition. And I think we're conflating those two things in this clip, because you said that we should approach truth with humility. And yeah, there can be particular actions of approaching, but I would say approach to me seems more like we're always coming nearer to it, as in a general sense, not as here's a particular instance where you approach with where you're humble at that moment. There's humility as a disposition, which I think is more of what we're talking about. I might be mistaken, and that might be a distinction without a difference. I just feel like um, considering it as a disposition might be helpful as
Well,
a general disposition.
I think you bring up an excellent point, and a good distinction. I think, okay, so humility is a disposition, and to the degree that we have it, becomes discovered when we have to apply it. So, so we can consciously or intellectually understand the benefits of humility, and even the most arrogant person could probably define humility perfectly, right? Now, whether or not you or I or an individual has that actual disposition. Disposition is different than intellectual knowledge to define it. So the disposition. So if someone is disposed to humility, doesn't mean that they're humble and they get the humble award and they get to pin it to their chest and win it around because they've arrived. No, it just means that they are disposed to that. They intellectually understand it, but they also have submitted to it. And then the test of being humble is in our daily lives, we are faced with that over and over and over again to work and train that virtue in us to actually be our go-to response rather than our go-to response of self-defensiveness or attack or whatever.
Yeah.
So that I agree with you that it's humility is a disposition, and that disposition comes by uh, uh, in some manners, some people higher intellectually will understand it better, but um, your intellectual prowess will not define the sweetness or the quality of your the disposition of humility that you have. It's just it's an intellectual assent to something is greater than I, and uh, and I need to submit to that
Yeah.
possibly.
It's very similar to faith. Faith is a disposition and a certain particular
Act of
action.
reason. Yep.
Yeah.
Their opinion. Sometimes humility is not so much recognizing that we can be wrong. It's like power.
It's a balance.
It's like, yeah, it's like power. You know, Jesus had ultimate power, and yet he didn't use it.
Right.
If
There
you or
was a
I
time
had,
to use it.
yeah, um, if you and I had that kind of power, we would have accidentally killed many people in our lives. Boom, get out of here.
That's
But
because we're not careful many times.
yeah, we're not prudent. We're not humble. We're not meek. We're not gentle. We need to become those things. But anyway,
So where do we start?
so the first thing is knowing our faith.
Yep.
You know, knowing what we profess to be true.
Yes. Can you pause?
And so
I really just have a quick note. We
Mhm.
were just discussing temperance or prudence without naming it exactly, but we were talking about like the there's certain times to say certain things or use certain abilities, and there's other times not to do it. And I think humility helps us to there's some connection between it and prudence that I see based on what we were just discussing.
no, I agree with you. I think that's a good point. And when you bring that up, it just makes me think that uh, you know, you and I study and have read a lot about the virtues and the vices and things like that. There are people that maybe could not define any of those virtues. They haven't read Aquinas and the Summa Theologica. You and I haven't read it completely. I think it's 4,000 pages. But they are very prudent. They're very They have humility. They have temperance. They have a high level of justice. They have courage. They have these. They are operated in these virtues without really maybe being able to define them.
Right.
And so, uh, and that points to, what do you think? That I think it points to two things, but what do you think that points to?
Well, I think that the virtues are so connected that it's hard to distinguish and say, hey, this is humility over here, and this is prudence over here, this is temperance over here. It's like, in reality, we wouldn't really separate them like that. It's not easy to distinguish those different virtues, even though we can come up with some philosophical reason or explanation of here's how this is different. But for most people, that's not the primary concern. If we're actually trying to practice virtue, it doesn't necessarily matter as much if we have particular details of here's this particular virtue and here's a label. They're so connected that it's kind of like when you have one, you're gonna tend to have the others, I think.
Yeah, well, what you're saying, they all work. All work closely, so closely together. I just think there's so many people that I can think of that if I went and asked them, I would consider them as like really operating um, very virtuously. And if I said, "Wow, you really have developed your virtues," they probably would look at me like, "What are virtues? What are you talking about?" but but so uh my thing that I was thinking of is that it kind of indicates that like in other shows that we've talked about, is that this is something that points to the creator who has put into man to operate a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's already something that it's created in the makeup of man that God created, that these things would work because and that's one thing. And then the other thing too is we also know that God's grace empowers the cardinal virtues which are prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. um it actually lifts them up to become supernatural virtues of prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. And so God naturally made man to function well with these. And so it should there should be a natural flow of those in us and in individuals, and we see that because we see it because they can't a person may not be able to define what they're doing, but they've learned this is the best way to operate, you know.
Right.
And then on top of that, God's grace, he extends his grace to those who seek him, and that lifts those graces past just simply the natural realm, but into the supernatural. And so that's why you may say that a certain atheist, who we obviously disagree on, the purpose and calling of man, why they can operate on really a high level of natural virtue, but but they'll never, without God, it won't be supernatural. Hmm. Should I
Yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead and play? So it starts with us as individuals. So we look at the political world.
Yep.
We look at the culture breakdown across the world.
All
We
the
look at war,
problems.
all the problems: war, devastation,
Rumors of
hunger,
wars.
starving, rumors of wars, school boards, promoting vile wickedness, our churches, where there's some that are teaching wickedness or promoting wicked lifestyles
Yep.
in the name of Christ. All these things that press in on us, and all these concerns are legitimate concerns, and that's where we say that we need to be informed of these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we need to know that change starts
with the
In
individual.
my life, with the individual, in my life.
Yep.
Okay. So you want to be the most effective Christian and husband or wife, etc.
Child, yeah.
Okay. You don't do that by shipping a bunch of cheese to Klakakistan.
Mm-hmm. Can you
You know where
pause?
that country is, right?
No idea. I'm sorry, I could keep pausing, but this came to mind. Did you see the JD Vance um clip recently of him talking about how it's a very Christian idea of how it starts with the individual, the family, and then it goes to community or neighbors, the country, and then um, people that live elsewhere as like the levels of priority.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael Knowles alluded to it being, or not alluded to it, he talked about it being like Aquinas that kind of puts it that way. But I just thought it was interesting that we're talking about and starting with the individual, because that is the starting point of everything else, uh,
Mm-hmm.
of priorities too. Okay, that may sound bad because I'm not saying be selfish. I'm saying figure out what your issues are and what you need to do. Um, so anyway, I just thought it was
Well,
interesting seeing that
well,
it's similar to what JD Vance was talking about, which I think relates to
yeah.
the same thing.
Well, the saying that charity begins at home, you know, uh, but that statement is not finished. It's charity begins at home, but that's not where it stops,
Right.
you know. But it begins at home, and so yeah, JD Vance is sharing. You said Aquinas, and it might be Aquinas, but it's the Catholic principle of subsidiarity, which is basically again, charity begins at home. Authority begins at home, and
Right.
parents have responsibility over the children, not the state, not the city, not the county. Everything begins. It's even in Alexis de Tocqueville. He doesn't use those terms, but he's basically stating how amazing that the United States is built on ruling coming beginning at the local,
Yeah.
and that they actually directly vote for their those who are in authority over them from the state kind of government, and so that those who are elected are accountable to them, compared to something being controlled from way outside somewhere else in some far reaches of Washington D.C. Which Washington, D.C. has a part to play in the governance of our country, but it is the furthest from us. So it should have the least amount of effect on us
Mm-hmm.
directly in our. So, anyway,
Well,
so yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it relates to the four purposes of the federal government of, um, you know, trade between the states, trade with other countries, protecting the borders of the country, and I don't remember what the last one is, but
Contractual law, maybe between free citizens.
I don't remember what it is. But
Okay.
um, anyway,
Yeah, good point. Yeah, it's not rocket science, right?
never heard of it.
Yeah, it's not a real country, but anyway, I
I
just use
thought so.
Kazakhstan. So I ship all the cheese to Kazakhstan. That's not changing the world if I'm a jerk or if I'm unruly to my against my parents and disobedient. So it starts with the individual. So professing your faith and knowing your faith.
Well, it's interesting about talking about giving to others, like across overseas. Some of that can be virtue signaling, or what would it be? It would be showiness. It can be showiness, and so we got to have the balance of being able to do the right thing, but have it as a habit. And so, we can't really change the world unless we change
Habit
ourselves.
is a habit. Habit is a habit. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we can't really change the world without changing ourselves, and maybe we'll never change the world. But is that the point?
No,
Are we here to
actually,
change the world?
and the answer would be no. You know, that would be a secondary. We're not here to change the world.
Can you pause? That could be a result, but that's not. I'm sorry, this is gonna go on forever. But I just wanted to point out, what I was just talking about is the distinction between um, two of Jesus's statements of doing things in front of others, like shining the lampstand. Like you don't put it under a bowl, but you let it shine. But then
Right.
also not doing things to be seen by others. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's kind of a difficult thing for some people to understand. Like he says that you want people to see your good works, but then also he says you don't want people to see your good works. So which one is it? But I think it comes down to intention, right? Is like what you should be doing is you should be acting in this way in a loving manner without thinking about it. I mean, you're intending to do it for the good of another person, but you shouldn't be always considering, oh, why am I, um, oh goodness, I'm sorry. I'm
Am I getting the credit due that me?
right, right. It's, um, we should be doing it and have it as a habit, like I said. That's what it comes down to, I think, is the habit is built by the intention.
Well, and so again, Jesus also says that, or maybe it's Paul, but where he says that sometimes good deeds or bad deeds are hidden, but they'll be revealed at the end. And sometimes bad deeds are very open and everyone can see them, and marches with us to the end. And then it says that good deeds oftentimes are hidden, and but will be with us at the end. And um, so yeah, like you said, that if if you're focused, if you're focused on just doing what's right, there's naturally there's going to be times that people are going to see you, and naturally there are going to be
Exactly.
times that don't see you. And but if you're concerned, or if I'm concerned that gosh, did they see how good I was? In doing that, well, then my intention is wrong. And eventually, if that's my driving force to be seen, eventually I will end up not doing good things, because good things, good acts of kindness, giving alms is purposeful, but it's fitting for the time. So that what I mean, it's proper for the time. And so if I'm doing it to be seen, then I'm going to be giving at the wrong time,
Mhm.
or I'm going to try to do something to be seen at the wrong time. And um, so anyway,
Well,
yeah.
okay. So two things. You put that really well. That's what I was trying to say. Is you shouldn't be worried about other people seeing you. You should do it anyway without questioning whether or not they see you. But I
Hmm.
also will say that maybe at the time that you realize, hey, I'm doing this to be seen, maybe that's the time that you're like, okay, I could be doing this to be seen, but I recognize it, so I'm going to act anyway. Because it doesn't matter, it does matter what your intention is, but I should do this act anyway.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. That you're starting to play multiple level chess. You are entering the playoffs, and your game is really getting up there, because what's happening is you are being exposed, or I'm being exposed to some faults in myself. And so I'm still going to do what I should do there, but I'm not going to shirk away, or I'm not going to hide away recognizing that, you know what, some of my motivation is to be seen here. And so, that's the conscience that God gave us to quicken us to recognize those things in us. And sometimes it can be the work of the Spirit convicting us. And it doesn't mean, hey, keep feeding that poor person or keep helping your neighbor there. But I want you to know that you've got some bad attitudes about this, and we need to work on that. But don't stop doing what is right.
Yep.
Right.
The purpose.
That's probably another show. Which
that would be a long conversation.
The desire for utopia.
Yep.
But what you're describing about helping others, and I think it was Charles Dickens, and I don't know all his
telescopic,
but he talked about he wanted to show the futility of what he called telescopic philanthropy. Telescopic philanthropy. So I guess that's self-explanatory, but you're looking at helping somebody 2,000 miles away across the ocean, and there's poor and hungry people in your neighborhood, maybe in your own household.
Yep.
It starts at your home, and it's not being selfish to take care of yourself first. You can only give what you have.
Yeah.
Right?
Right, yeah.
Well, so I can't swim, and there's somebody drowning, and I go, well, I'm going to feel better about myself. I'm going to jump in and drown that person and myself. No.
It's futile.
Okay, you don't know how to swim, but you know how to run.
Right.
Run and go get that rope. Run and go call. Run and grab somebody else. Run and use what you have. But you can only use what you have.
Run around in circles.
And so it starts small. It starts in our own selves, then our own home, our own families, our own extended families, our own community, or I should say our neighborhood, our community, our county. It goes continues. Out from there.
Yeah, and right. Kind of if you look at what the Pharisees were saying, and Jesus points out their hypocrisy, is they were throwing away the commandments of the Lord, and they were saying, well, instead of obeying my parents, I'm going to give the respect that I would have given for my parents and try and do something else with it. And, I'm helping and I'm praising God and I'm doing all this for God. But you are ignoring what God told you to do. So clearly you are not doing what God said, because God said to do this. The first part of loving God and Jesus is doing what he tells you. Just like it says in the scriptures. Why do you say, Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? And so we have a responsibility to do what's right, even if it doesn't have the biggest impact in the world, even if it doesn't change the world. That's not the purpose of our lives here. And so we need to be aware of what's going on to be able to discern what's right and wrong. And we need to do what's right when it's in front of us, instead of giving that $5 to charity and then doing nothing else. It's a lifestyle. It's the war is here. And what do we do in response? The war of life is here, not the wars of the past or from far away. It's right here. What do you do? What are you doing?
So then you have the telescope.
That is actually a chilling statement for me when I hear that clip. The war is here. What are we going to do about it? Right? It's at your doorstep. And that's I personally really, really like that. It's the war is here. What we should be fighting is already at our doorstep, right in front of us. And so what are we going to do about it? Because instead of focusing on the wars far away, we should be focusing on the war that we can actually be a part of, right? And one of the biggest things that we are called to do is pray. That's one of our biggest forms of fighting that we have to do. And it starts with the individual, and we can focus on the wars far away, but what is going to actually change things for us and for others who we love, loving our neighbors, it starts with fighting the battle that is here. And it always comes back to this, right? The world, the flesh, and the devil. Starting with the flesh, the fight with the world and the devil. But I think it has to do with the flesh mostly, fighting the flesh, and I think that's the biggest battle we have right now.
Well, and you mentioned prayer, and once in a while, when I'm praying, I'll thank the Lord for the gift and the precious gift of prayer. What I mean by that is that it's so easy. Uh it is really prayer is really a gift. It's a gift given for us to get to know the Lord and to pray for others and pray for ourselves as well. But it's just a gift. It's like if you had a really great friend that lived in your household, but you couldn't talk to them, uh, that would make the relationship very difficult, if not impossible, if you couldn't communicate with them. Um, and I don't mean I mean some would say, well, yeah, you might not be able to talk, but you can write on the board. But I'm just talking about to the gift of communication. And so, like you mentioned that, and you're right that the battle is right at our doorstep, and prayer is one of the most easiest. Not that prayer can be not. It's not always easy because it requires dedication and time and effort. But it is easy in the fact that it's what you can do.
Right.
And not only it's not just it doesn't just make us, it may make us feel better, and it does, but that's not why you do it. It actually is doing something.
Yeah.
It actually is yeah, God could do it all himself. And actually those things that are accomplished supernaturally are accomplished by God,
Mm-hmm.
but he wants us to be a part of it. And yeah, so I just emphasize and agree with you, absolutely clear that the battle is at our doorstep. uh uh and one of the clearest ways is prayer, and it's so easy and accessible to anybody. um
Yeah.
to be a prayer warrior doesn't take, you don't have to be Mother Teresa or whoever. You can just pray in whatever way, an honest way that you have in communicating and offering prayer to God
Mm-hmm.
and on behalf of others. And so, yeah, I agree with you. That's
One
really
last
important.
thing. Um, the part of the reason why it's chilling is I would say label it as like a call to action. Like, the war is here. What are we gonna do? Right? Because it's easy to be worried about wars from foreign powers or even civil wars. But do we typically think of our daily lives as a war? No, we don't typically. But um, I also was just thinking that church is also very important. I mean, obviously, but the
Hmm.
thing about church is it's being part of the kingdom of God, right? It's the kingdom of God on earth. It's the emissary of, or whatever. What's it called? We talked about this the other day.
Well, the
The
embassy.
embassy of an embassy, and so that's another thing that is so important. But anyway, we should probably move on when you're ready, unless you have a
Well,
thought.
yeah, one thing I'm kind of picturing, like you said, the war is right at our doorstep. We're in the war, and I was just trying to picture, if you pictured a really terrible war scene, you can even think of Braveheart, when the two wars are clashing, or the two armies are clashing with another, hand to hand combat, and you know, launching large rocks or whatever. Um, and I'm just picturing that if you could think of if we could think of our lives now like we are, can you imagine those people in that war not ever realizing that their arm is getting cut off or they're getting stabbed, or or their city is getting pillaged and burned. If you weren't aware and had any sense that that was going on, but you were just wandering in the battlefield, sometimes we operate in that way in our lives because there is a spiritual war going on, and but we're oblivious to it. But just because we're oblivious to it does not mean that wounds are being inflicted.
Aren't
And
that they aren't being inflicted?
correct. Yeah, that wounds aren't being inflicted, because they are, to us and to others. That we're always under attack, and maybe if God could pull back the blinders on our eyes to see it, maybe we'd be too frightened to even enter the battle. I'm not sure, but we are in a battle. The war is at our doorstep.
Yep.
Topic, philanthropy, or the
Philanthropy.
telescopic philanthropy. That's one pitfall. The other pitfall is to look around and say, so and so isn't doing anything about
Yep,
this problem.
absolutely.
Okay. Oh, that person isn't. Well, there's always a saying that you've heard that true people that are leaders or are slash
True
doers
leaders.
are those who say, lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. You know, and that type of person does not have time to figure out who is or who isn't doing what they should be doing. They're more concerned about what they should be doing.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it starts, like we said, with yourself, then your family, then your extended family, your neighborhood, etc. And out from there, it starts in the center. And so, and in order to do that, it takes faith.
Yep.
Because you want
Can you
to,
pause?
you see what's going on in Kazakhstan. And
So I just want to point something out about that. It's not individualism. It's not like we stop at the individual. It's just a recognition of subsidiarity, as you called it, of recognizing how it works. I think individualism, taken to an extreme, doesn't take into consideration those other aspects of life, the family and neighborhoods and state and foreign entities.
mm-hmm.
The thing is, we're talking about what the starting point is. We're not talking about the individual's autonomy. That's not the idea. The idea is that's where it starts. I think that's a worthwhile clarification.
Well, you you hit it nail on the head. It's because sometimes people will maybe accuse, oh, you're just a radical individualist, or you're just into individualism. It's like, no, we're talking about the individual being accountable. We're talking about our accountability as individuals. And so we're talking accountability. And so
Yep.
so you want to help Kazakhstan, and maybe you can. That's a different subject,
Yeah, right.
to some degree. But if you're not standing up and helping where you're at, what you're doing over there really doesn't mean anything. It doesn't. It has no lasting fruit.
Yeah.
So coming back to when Jesus was telling the Pharisees, they took money that was owed to their parents.
Yeah.
And they gave it, they would say, to the church or to the synagogue, or
Yeah.
But in reality, Jesus knew their hearts. They weren't giving out of love for the church or the synagogue. They were buying favor.
Yeah.
Oh, look at so and so gave us $10,000. He's such a wonderful man. He's helping us build our synagogue. He did it for the compliment.
Yep.
And yet that wasn't money that should have gone to, perhaps shouldn't have gone to the church or to the synagogue. It maybe should have gone to his family.
Right.
Maybe should have gone to his brother who was in need, or his sister, or son or daughter, or parent.
The people that depend on them.
Yeah. So coming back to it, starts
with the individual.
With the individual, and the scripture says, "Put on the whole armor of God." Okay. That doesn't, you know, Z. Tell me what I call you, Z. I call you
Z.
Pinchy, whatever.
Pinchy.
Pinchy. When it says put on the whole armor of God, does it say that takes like 5 minutes?
Nope. Nope.
How long does that take?
Your entire life.
Exactly. It's something you have to work on all the time, and it doesn't happen overnight. And it's a little here, a little there.
Ooh, I just
But
thought of something.
you put on the armor of God.
Maybe you'll get into this, but I was just thinking it's you put on your armor and then you take it off to end the day. Like, I'm going to sleep. But then you put it back on again, right? And so it's the reason why it's something that we continually put on. But anyway, that was just something, interesting idea.
Mm-hmm. So you start taking care of yourself. You start informing yourself. You know, a lot of Christians don't believe they need to really go to church because they think church is everywhere. They think the church is just some spiritual thing that's out there, and it's just like me and my Bible,
Yep.
and I'm just going to be humming in the closet. It's like, no, you need other people. Church is an assembly, ecclesia, assembly.
Well, it starts with the individual, but it's not solely the individual, because
the individual has responsibilities.
Yeah, absolutely, and we need to be. We are community people. We are the social animal, as Dave Berlinski says. I'm pretty sure he's the one that says that all the time. And it's not original with him.
We
need to have a certain balance.
What?
It's not original with him. It's Aristotle.
No, Aristotle. Yeah. So
we're not here for ourselves, but we still have things that we got to do, and we got to do it together at some point, because we're not single islands. We're not islands.
Islands unto ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so Jesus said that we are small rocks, individually members of the body of Christ.
Churches.
So,
I here and here there, one part. Yeah.
But still of the one body.
Yeah.
So even though the first starting point is ourselves, we have a purpose to assist others.
Yeah.
In a interdependent way, just like like you mentioned that the hand doesn't say the foot, I have no need of thee, or the foot doesn't say to the hand, I have no need of thee, or the head to the feet, or the eye to the ear. No, they all work together. They're individually members of it. Yeah. That's the difference. One of the main differences in communism, and a lot of people want to say that Christianity is socialistic or communistic. It's like it's
and
nothing
they give the one example. They give the one example.
Yeah, and it's nothing of the kind, because it says that we are individually members of a body.
Yeah.
Individually members of a body.
One body, many members.
Exactly. We have our individuality.
Yeah.
And God knows us, each and every one of us individually.
Yeah. And did you get the reference that I was bringing up? They give the one example. I was talking about the passage in Acts where it talks about the apostles and believers sharing their possessions. And that's the example that's given to bolster the idea of communism or that kind of social communal policy. Like that's what the point is. But what we're talking about here is what it means to be a member one of another, or members one of another, as well as we're individually members one of another. What that means to me, or indicates to me, is the idea that these individual parts function a certain way and have a certain purpose that that they accomplish. They can only accomplish those goals when attached to the body, but they still have their own individual identity. A pinky is a pinky. There's no doubt about it. It's a pinky. It's not an ear that attaches there. It couldn't just be any member that attaches there. It's that specific member with that certain essential quality of being a finger. And so it has its individual identity, but that individual identity must be joined, otherwise it's useless on its own. But it also must contain its essential characteristic, otherwise it's of no use to the body.
Hmm. Well, I'm thinking that the fact that this world is not our destination might be the real turning point to why I haven't thought this through, but I have a sense that it's true. If I could um, explain it clearly, is like, okay, if there were no heaven and there were no God, then communism might make a little bit more sense in its because its ending point is here. I don't think it would still make sense, but that's where the differentiation, I think one clear distinction happens is yes, we are operating um as a pinky or a foot or whatever we are, and it's for the benefit of society at large, and for the individuals in our home and our communities. It's all to make this world, or to proceed through this world as best we can. Um, uh, and but because this world is not our ending point or our aiming point or where our citizenry is truly found, that is don't I don't know if you can know what I'm trying to say. It's just that that is really a clear defining point or a clarification or a qualification of why we are focused on being accountable here. If for some reason I'm in a community and that community is absolutely um, wicked or absurd, if I'm still doing what I'm supposed to be doing, um, in a God focused manner, uh, maybe in this world, I won't I won't have the success or the camaraderie or the utopia that I'm looking for because I'm in the midst of a real broken situation. But I still am held accountable to be that finger, that pinky, because at some point that pinky is going to be attached to the permanent body of the new heaven and new earth. Does that make sense?
Um, I'm trying to understand the connections. Um,
Okay.
how does the keeping the end in mind, or telos, or purpose, which is found in heaven, how does that relate to our individual identity in what
Well,
you're saying here?
okay, so what I'm trying to differentiate, or what I'm seeing here, is that um, it comes back to uh, a little bit of what we said before, is that being worried about what other people are doing instead of being focused on our accountability. Because I guess maybe it's what I'm talking about is the reward for me being virtuous and accountable and focused on being the best son or daughter of God that a person can be. The reward will never truly be found in this world. We do get rewards in a sense of having peace of heart and contentment and soul in this world, even amidst the storms. But the reward for what we're doing is somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean,
And so,
the end does affect what we do now. Um, I'm still not quite understanding the picture, but
well, it's like Paul saying that if we serve Christ for this world only, we're the most to be pitied. Uh, uh, does he mean that we shouldn't serve Christ? No. He's saying that we serve Christ here. We are held accountable here. We hold ourselves accountable here for that next place. Yeah, maybe it's just something I have to flesh out, or you and I can flesh out in another episode. But I think that's something I'm going to look into and get more detailed before I
okay,
share it live
sounds
on
good.
the podcast.
I just I'm struggling to put the what we were just talking about
Oh,
in I'm struggling to see the connection exactly,
hmm.
but so
Well,
anyway.
I guess it was I guess it's the fact that we talked about communism and that um, people accuse or some people falsely look at the gospel as supportive or of communism, and obviously there's some really clear differences. And I think one of the major differences is where the reward is found, and the purpose for us being seemingly communal in this world, what that purpose of that communal relationship is. It's not to establish utopia in this world, but
I
it's to,
see.
pardon?
I see.
Yeah.
I see
Okay.
now that um you're levying a um levying. It's a response to communism that you're establishing here. Of
Hmm.
communism doesn't take into consideration the true end of man, which is to be with God forever, um, and to praise Him. And
Hmm.
so, because communism doesn't take that into consideration, it is fundamentally flawed. And so, if our end was this world, then maybe communism wouldn't be as big of a thing to, uh, you know, fight against. But because it doesn't take seriously our anthropology, then it's fundamentally flawed in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this might be a good stopping point. What do you think?
Let's get to like the halfway part. So like 25 minutes.
Individually. And so, anyway, where were we going?
Well, we're
Oh,
showing
individuals.
those pitfalls, yeah, in
Don't
Yeah.
individuals.
So,
don't
anyway,
over
we
that.
take care of ourselves. We start working with our families, and we do basically. It comes down to what is under your control. This is nothing new.
Yeah.
We've heard a lot of teaching on this, both secular and Christian teaching. What do you control, and what is your concern? And where those overlap should be your priority.
Yep.
Um, a lot of times, what we control and what is our concern, it doesn't. My control over how the government in Kazakhstan is operating is not under my control, and in fact, it's not hugely. Is that a word?
Hugely.
It's not very. It's not very much within my scope
Purview,
of
yeah.
concern as well, because uh,
You're not
obviously
there.
because I'm not there. You can only love those who you know. So
Can you
Those who
pause?
you see.
right, who you see and know.
There are certain cases though, right, where you should be doing something but you don't have the ability to do it, right? I'm sure that there's some circumstance where that's the case.
What do you mean?
Well,
I agree with you, but
maybe accountability isn't the same because you weren't able to follow through, not because of anything that um you did, but I'm just saying I think that there probably are certain circumstances where you should be doing something but you don't have the ability. It's not within your control.
well, um, well, if we should be doing something, then we should be doing it. But um, maybe you're saying that. I mean, I agree with you, but
Well, you were pointing out the two things. You were pointing out the ability to carry out something, and
mhm.
two, what you should be focused on. So, or sorry, maybe a better way to put it is obligation and then ability.
Mhm.
So you have a certain obligation, but you don't have the ability to carry it out. Is what I'm pointing out. Is there not some circumstance where that would be the case? When you're obligated to do something, but you don't have the ability to do it.
Well, I would challenge and say that if we're obligated to do something, then we would have the ability to do it. But maybe a point of clarification would be that maybe we don't have the ability to do it to the degree we'd like. So we mentioned Kazakhstan or whatever. It's not. Is it within my concern? it because I'm aware of it, it has some of my concern. So there may be a time that what I will do is pray for Kazakhstan. I would like to do more, let's say, donate money or time or go there and to be part of the effort to rebuild or preserve or conserve. But so I think wherever there's an obligation, there is always if we have an obligation, then we have the ability to do something about it. Would you agree?
I'm not sure.
Because otherwise it couldn't be an otherwise it couldn't be an obligation.
I don't quite see that, because like we are obligated as human beings to fulfill the law of God.
Okay.
We are not able to fulfill the law of God. Isn't that why Christ came? Because
I think we are,
because we we didn't have the ability to carry out the law.
Well, that, like you said, that's probably another. There's some really fine points to discuss. That is,
Yeah.
So I would just simply say that that if we have an obligation, then we have the ability to do it, and so and we have the we're accountable to do it. And what you're talking about is the fact that that because of the weakness of our condition, that that we do not fulfill it properly or completely. Definitely not salvifically without God's assistance. But can I, if I'm obligated not to kill someone, even without God's grace, I am capable of not killing somebody. And so, because I can recognize it as a human through my anthropology, to know that it would be wrong to murder my neighbor.
Yeah.
And I can successfully not murder my neighbor without God's grace.
But that's a particular example.
Right.
So, again, this is a long topic. So, at this point, what we should leave it as is, I think I disagree, but I don't know for certain. So, let's just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, everyone, thanks for listening. Pinchy. Godspeed.
Have a good week.